This episode is brought to you by Paycor, the HR and payroll software made for leaders. It's never been harder to recruit, hire, and engage workers. That's why HR leaders and frontline managers depend on Paycor for all things people management, from onboarding and performance reviews to compensation and benefits. Learn more at paycor.com/leaders.
Welcome to Mom and Dad Are Fighting, Slate's parenting podcast for Monday, August 14th, the Your Eyeballs Are Gonna Fall Out of Your Head edition. I'm Jamilah Lemieux, a writer, contributor to Slate's Care and Feeding parenting column, and mom to Naima, who's 10, and we live in Los Angeles.
I'm Zak Rosen. I am also host of another podcast. It's called The Best Advice Show. And I'm the dad to Noah, who's 5, and Ami, who's 2. We live in Detroit.
Today on the show, we're welcoming back Phillip Maciak. He was here last time to laud your favorite TV show, Bluey. He's back today to talk about one of the hottest parenting topics around, screen time. That's also the name of his new book, which traces the history and meaning of this complicated topic. We'll hear Zak's interview with Phil right after this break.
This episode is brought to you by KiwiCo. I have a very distinct memory from when I was 7 years old. My mom left me home alone for the first time. It was probably just for like 20 minutes, but she left me with this geology kit that came with a little pick and a big slab of clay that had like stones inside that I had to dig out. I love that activity. I can imagine doing it right now. And it reminds me of what KiwiCo is doing. KiwiCo is defining the future of play by making it engaging, enriching, and seriously fun. They create super cool hands-on projects designed to create a lifelong love for learning among kids. I recently did a project with Noah, my almost 6-year-old. It is part of the astronaut starter kit. We painted a set of model planets and then constructed a miniature solar system that actually spins. It is very cool. Redefine learning with play. Explore hands-on projects that build creative confidence and problem-solving skills with KiwiCo. Get 50% off your first month, plus free shipping on any crate line at kiwico.com/momanddad. That's 50% off your first month at kiwico.com/momanddad. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Whether you're driving, cooking, or doing laundry, Progressive knows the podcasts you listen to go best when they're bundled with another activity. Much like how their Progressive home and auto policies go best when they're bundled. Having these two policies together makes taking care of your insurance easier and can help you save too. Customers who save by switching their home and car insurance to Progressive save nearly $800 on average. That's a whole lot of savings and protection for your favorite podcast listening activities, like going on a road trip, cooking dinner, and even hitting the home gym. Yep, your home and your car are even easier to protect when you bundle your insurance together. Find your perfect combo. Get a home and car insurance quote at progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $793 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2021 and May 2022. Potential savings will vary.
We're back. Zak, what can we look forward to in this interview you did with author Phillip Maciak about screen time?
So Phil is a TV critic as well as an author and a professor, and he writes just really smartly and historically about the emergence of, the moral panic that is, my kids are getting too much screen time. Like that has been going on for quite some time. And in fact, the phrase screen time emerges in the early 90s. And he talks about this Mother Jones article where it first emerged. And like, just the meaning of screen time itself has changed so much because, when we were growing up, of course, like screen time was like our TVs and like if we had computers. But now like screens are just ubiquitous in kind of a wild way, with phones, even our like refrigerators, some of them, not mine, but fancy people have screens on their fridges. Like screens are everywhere. And so our relationship to this moral panic that he describes has also evolved. So we talk about that. And, we start out by talking about our kids. Phil's also a parent. So I asked him how he talks to his kids about screen time and how he is able to talk about screens, this thing that he's, devoted his life to without stigmatizing it.
And with that, let's hear Zak's interview with Phillip Maciak.
Welcome back to Mom and Dad Are Fighting.
Thank you so much for having me.
How has your relationship to Bluey changed since we last talked?
We're a little bit out of the Bluey, like the high period of Bluey, but the games are still there. And every once in a while, my daughters are like, pretend that you don't know anything, and you have to ask what everything is. And that's when Bluey rears its head.
That's a great way to rear it, though. That's such a fun game. Is there a new obsession?
Not really. My youngest daughter is really into Maura Royal Detective.
Oh yeah. Let's hear it from Maura Royal Detective. I know
that song
it well.
is in my head all the time. We're on the case.
We're on the case.
She's always saying, I think these people might be bandits. And she's right a lot of the time.
Who is she referring to? Like corporate tycoons?
No, normally it's just the usual bandits on Maura. But
on the show. Older, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Succession. She's talking about Succession.
So you have two kids, right? Yours are 7 and 3?
7 and 3, yeah.
Yep, and mine are 5 and 2. And so both of us still control our kids' screens. And so I look around and I see some parents like stigmatizing screens. And I get that. I probably do it myself sometimes. I try not to. So I'm just curious for you as a scholar of screens and screen time and media and television, how do you talk to your kids about screen time?
Yeah, well, so like you said, we're both in a position where our kids are young enough that we're sort of, we're DJing to a certain extent or another what they're watching.
Right.
And I think, I talk about this a little bit in the book, but I grew up in the 90s, right, in the high period of the screen time, moral panic stuff. And my parents were very relaxed about it. Like I never got a sense from them that TV was, because it was TV at that point. And video games a little bit, but I'm so bad at video games. It was never really a problem.
Same.
I don't know that they worked very hard to do this, but they just didn't stigmatize it. I never had a real sense when I was growing up that this was something that was, in essence, bad. And I think that I have a lot of memories, screen time memories as a kid of shared screen time, watching movies, beloved movies with my parents, or watching a big sports event or something like that. But I think we've tried in a lot of ways to do that with our kids, right? To give them the sense that what they're watching does matter, right? What they choose matters, and that it is a choice, right? But also that there isn't something that is inherently bad about this.
Yeah. So in this book, you basically say the screen asks you to look at it, and it makes you feel bad, or bad and something more when you do. This is what it's like. This confusion is how it feels. This is screen time. So this is a book about that feeling, where it comes from, what we can do with it, and what it does to us. So what is this feeling? How do you describe it?
For me, it's ambivalence. But I think part of the sort of cultural history that I draw out in the book is a cultural history of how that ambivalence leans bad so often, leans negative. And I think a lot of that is sort of rhetorical framing, right? I feel good about some things I do on screens, right? I like watching my favorite shows. Yep. I like seeing friends on Instagram. I like connecting with people. I like writing, right? And then there are things that I don't like on screens or that make me feel bad, right? I write about revenge bedtime procrastination, the kind of like compulsive scroll of the internet that you do when you're avoiding going to sleep, or
the Wikipedia rabbit holes,
or UFO videos, right? Things that freak me out or cause me to lose things, right? Those are bad things. And so to that degree, I feel ambivalent, right? I feel like there are things I do there that are good for me, that have helped me, right? I connect with people, and there are things that are bad. But I think that part of the screen time phenomenon that I write about in the book is about how there's been a lot of pressure to move away from that ambivalence in a cultural sense, to understand screens as wholly bad, or as in some way poisoned by the things that are bad about them, such that we need to think about them in terms of regulation and eradication and abstinence, right? Yeah. Rather than, qualitatively in terms of what they do for us and against us.
And is the beginning of this rhetorical framing that you mentioned, does it start with this Mother Jones article by Tom Engelhardt in 1991, or is that just kind of an example of the rise of the idea of screen time as moral panic?
So the idea of screen time and of the regulation of screens and of the idea that screens are bad for you is not, vintage 1991. That's something that has existed since the very beginning. And there are a lot
of
the very beginning of television. Sorry.
Okay.
This is really a phenomenon that I think is, film has a long history, somewhat parallel, somewhat separate history of the sort of understanding of it as harmful or scary or things like that. But the screen time thing that we're dealing with now is, I think, really a phenomenon of the television era. And people have always been worried about TV for any number of reasons. In the early days, a lot of the worry was more focused on quality, right? So, this is some television is of low quality, some of it is of high quality, that sort of thing. The inflection point that is in 1991, or that I think is named, is how I talk about it in the book. It gets kind of named in 1991, is this inflection point of understanding the response to these feelings about TV to be a response that needs to be regulatory. Right, that needs to be about raw numbers, right? You can't spend more than an hour on your screen, or you can't spend more than a half hour, doing this or that. And I think a lot of it is about the sort of ease of that policy for child rearing, right? You don't have to deal with all of the sort of complicated social vectors of television or screens for your kids, if you're just saying, well, you can't have them, or you can only have them for this amount of time. Yeah. And so I think that Tom Engelhardt essay kind of gives a name to it that helps it to go viral in the way that it has.
So what did Tom Engelhardt mean when he said screen time in 1991?
So his thing was that, so screen time prior to that, and still to some extent, refers to how much time an actor spends on screen. So like, what's your screen time in this episode of Law and Order that you're on, or something like that. And so Tom Engelhardt sort of reframed it as screen time in almost a more literal sense, right? How much time are you spending with screens? How much time are your kids spending with screens? And the interesting thing about that article, which I have now spent, as much time with as I've spent, teaching literature students to talk about, Moby Dick or something. The interesting thing to me about that article is that it has this very sort of, strong anti-consumerist message. It's an argument about the over-integration of advertising in children's television. Engelhardt sort of dates that as a new phenomenon. It wasn't a new phenomenon in 1991. It's a phenomenon that has been very true throughout television history, but he's not wrong to identify that it was happening, right? That advertisers and makers of children's television are sort of, allied in some unseemly or unwholesome way. Right. And his argument is basically that that's a problem, right? That there is good TV. There's Mr. Rogers, and there's TV that sort of tries to reflect the reality of the kids who watch it. And then there's TV that is just basically a commercial, right? And that we need to differentiate between that and all that stuff. And I think that to some extent, that argument, that part of his argument has sort of fallen away a little bit in favor of the part of his argument that's about regulating time. And I think it's because if you want to launch a critique of children's television, you have to pay attention to children's television. And I think a lot of people just don't want to do that. And they'd rather just say, okay, well, the problem is time. The problem is amount. The problem is exposure. Not what are they being exposed to? How are they interacting with it? How are they engaging with it? And are they engaging with it? And I think that's kind of very easily and understandably spread to talking about social media and talking about adult screen time as well.
When Tom Engelhardt is writing about screen time in 1991, that's obviously like before Kindles and phones and the display TV thing on our fridge. Like there's just so many more screens than there were. And so can you kind of chart the difference between the moral panic now in 2023 and the moral panic that he was describing in 1991?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think one big difference is that the moral panic now is about everybody. It's about kids, but it's also about adults. And I think that's largely because of the proliferation of devices, right? So they're linked, right? And then the second thing is when Engelhardt is talking about he calls it out of sight time, right? When kids are in the living room watching TV or playing video games and you're in the kitchen or doing something else, that's out of sight time for him. I think to some extent, the problem that has exacerbated, that has become bigger or has become, I don't know, more of an issue is that out of sight time, because these screens are personal. They're, televisions have always been personal, right? But smartphones and things like that are more personal, right? They're individualized. They are attuned to you, right? They know how many footsteps you're taking, that kind of a thing. And so the questions of surveillance and exposure and bad actors in the social media age and in the smartphone age means that out of sight time is much more stark, right? For parents, especially. It's made worse because parents understand their own smartphone usage to be bad, right? Maybe because, like me, they grew up in that era, right? But also because, it feels bad sometimes. And you think, well, what are my kids getting into, right? What are they being exposed to when I can't see them or when they are looking at their devices without me?
And also, like, if I can't control myself, how on earth am I going to teach them to do it?
Yeah, exactly.
Have you experimented with the Screen Time app much?
I had it deactivated. I did not have it activated before I started writing the book. And then I activated it to start writing the book. So I do have it, and I get my little notification and feels weird.
Does it work?
What do you mean, does it work?
Right. I guess, so the way I use it is I set limits on specifically Instagram and Twitter. And frankly, it's been working insofar as making me use it a lot less.
Right. I feel like I haven't really used the app's limits too much, in part because they're so easy to turn off and on. Yeah. I will say writing and publishing a book is a kind of is a stressful process, and the year leading up to this to the book's release, I have felt, ironically, or maybe not ironically, maybe very directly, I've felt that I have fallen over onto sort of doom scrolling type behavior as a way to manage the anxiety, and so I go nuclear. I delete the app from my phone, unless I have a piece coming out, or something that I need to do some I don't know, promotion or see how things are going online. I'll reinstall it if I've got something coming out or something like that, and then delete it afterwards. But I guess the app in some sense is giving me an understanding of how long I'm spending on it, right? How much time. But yeah.
I want to finish with our kids.
Sure.
And this is an advice show, and whether you like it or not, I'm about to ask you for some advice.
Oh no.
And it's really just about your lived experience, which I'm interested in. And it goes back to what you were saying initially about the notion of just not stigmatizing screens. So how precisely does that work in your house? Just to give folks an idea if they are interested in this approach.
I am pretty involved in helping the girls choose what they're going to watch. In the process of choosing. And it's not in a like, well, you can't watch this or you can't watch that, but we have, they're just in passing. We have a little conversation about what they're in the mood for, or what they might want to see. And we do that. I try to, be with them while they're watching on occasion. That's obviously not possible all the time, nor should it be possible all of the time. But I try to, and I think we try to give them the impression that we are sort of in and out of that space, right? This isn't, their relationship to the TV is not just them and the TV, right? It's often us. A thing that we also try to do is, if they're watching a show and we are able to, is to sit next to them and read. And it's cool. It's given them, I think, a sense that TV isn't the only thing that they could be doing in that moment. And our older daughter, who is, over the course of the pandemic has learned to read, will often choose to read instead of watching the show. Or we'll do what we do and sit with her sister while our sister's watching Mirror Royal Detective and read a book. Yeah.
That's great. I really like that idea. Phillip Maciak is the author of Avidly Reads Screen Time. It's slim. It's like 168 pages. It's really interesting, and it has made me think a lot more about how and why and when with all things screen. So, Phillip, thanks so much for your time.
It's always a pleasure.
This episode is brought to you by EveryPlate. Looking to budget your food expenses for the back-to-school season? Get more bang for your bite with America's best value meal kit. EveryPlate is 25% cheaper than grocery shopping, with no hidden fees, so you can count on great value week after week. Plus, only pay for what you need with pre-portioned ingredients. Cook once, eat twice with our new dinner to lunch dishes, tasty filling meals for both dinner and lunch the next day. Each recipe is carefully crafted to ensure the ingredients can be easily repurposed, so you won't feel like you're just eating leftovers. Plus, save some time making lunch on busy weekdays, with most of the work done at dinner. Their meals are 50% cheaper than your average fast casual meal. They're the easiest way to eat affordably. I just left my kitchen where I made my family the charred vegetable zucchini and tomato melts. It was so good. It's like a grilled cheese, but much, much better. I really liked this meal. So did my family. Get $1.49 per meal by going to everyplate.com/podcast and entering code 49momandDad. That's $1.49 per meal by going to everyplate.com/podcast and entering 49momandDad. That's up to a $110 value.
Between the kids being home and hosting, everything in our house gets used up in summer. With Instacart, I can save money by stocking up on all my favorite summer brands. I save time by getting everything delivered in as fast as an hour. And I save myself a sink full of dirty dishes by stocking up on paper plates for the annual summer cookout. Save more on summer essentials? Spend more time enjoying summer. Add summer to cart. Download the app to get free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by Paycor. Paycor empowers leaders to build winning teams. With Paycor, leaders can recruit, onboard and train employees, set goals, and drive performance. If you're a leader, everyone depends on you. Who do leaders depend on? Paycor. Learn more at paycor.com/leaders.
Finally, let's move on to the part of the show where we're recommending something we're loving right now. Zach, what are you recommending?
So I recently, just this week, introduced Ami to If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, the classic children's book, which I hadn't read in a long time. And he loved it. Like when he likes a book, we usually read it a bunch. And that's what we've been doing this week. So my recommendation is a 2-parter, visiting or revisiting If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. But then you can play this game that we invented. We're calling it the Mouse Game, which he's been asking for before bed, which is a really fun word association game. He is nearly 3, so I think it's perfect for this age where, that story is all about kind of word association. If you give a mouse a cookie, he'll ask for a glass of milk. And so the game goes like this, where I just say, like, if you give a mouse a basketball, and then Ami says, like, he'll ask for shorts. If you give a mouse an airplane, he'll ask for wings. So it's a fun game that you can play even if you don't have the book in hand, and it goes really well with the book as well. So the Mouse Game, along with the classic If You Give a Mouse a Cookie.
Very nice. Well, I'm giving an overdue recommendation to the Barbie movie. Naeem and I got to see it about 2 weeks ago, and it's lovely. It's not perfect. It deals with the complicated nature of Barbie and what she represents, I think, as well as it could. It's entertaining. It's fun. We liked it.
I saw it too. I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, and the musical numbers with Gosling were freaking entertaining as hell.
They were very entertaining.
What did you think about its articulation or critique of feminism?
I thought it was interesting. One of the big plot lines is that Ken discovers patriarchy and brings it to Barbie Land, and very quickly realizes that men generally have the upper hand and they control society, and the Barbies have to reclaim their matriarchy from Ken. And I wish they talked a little bit more just about what it means for women to live under patriarchy, and why the Barbie universe exists in the way it does, and poses this alternative universe for women and for little girls to fantasize about, what the world could look like. I wish they dug a little deeper there.
Yeah. Did Naima come away with any big questions or declarations?
No, she didn't. And she and her girlfriend screamed the lyrics to the Nicki Minaj and Ice Spice song, the one that has the Barbie World sample.
That was so good.
Barbie Girl sample. Yeah. They screamed it at the closing credits. They were very, very excited, but we didn't really have any profound conversations about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It exceeded my expectations.
Did you take the little ones?
No, what do you think? Do you think a 6-year-old would have fun in that movie?
No, it would probably bore her, honestly. I mean, I think
I was thinking that too.
I think some of the magic of Barbie Land would be interesting to her, but I think the story would be hard to follow. But I do think it's time for her to have her first Barbie.
Okay. I'll tell her that Auntie Jamilah is signing off on that.
I will send her a Barbie.
Oh, that's nice. She has been asking for them, and we have been listening to the song Barbie Girl. I think it's probably just a matter of time at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's our show, you guys. Please subscribe, leave a rating and review, and of course, tell your friends. This episode of Mom and Dad Are Fighting is produced by Rosemary, Belson, and Maura Currie. Shasha Leonard is the voice of our listeners. Alicia Montgomery is VP of Slate Audio. For Zak Rosen, I'm Jamilah Lemieux. Thank you for listening.
Hey everybody, it's Tim Heidecker. You know me, Tim and Eric, Bridesmaids, and Fantastic Four. I'd like to personally invite you to listen to Office Hours Live with me and my co-hosts, DJ Doug Pound.
Hello.
And Vic Berger.
Howdy.
Every week we bring you laughs, fun, games, and lots of other surprises. It's live. We take your Zoom calls.
Music.
We love having fun. Excuse me?
Songs. Vic said something.
Songs.
Music.
I like having fun. I like to laugh. I like to meet people who can make me laugh. Please subscribe now.